The
Yes.
June 4th Anderson County Council meeting, let's talk about what happened.
Yeah, tonight we went back to one of our regularly scheduled meetings on the first and third Tuesdays, and we started at 6 o'clock like we usually do when we have proclamations. And we started with honoring the Palmetto High School Junior Reserve, and this is an extraordinary young group of men and women who are doing a great job up there and showing leadership. We quickly went into also honoring the Crescent Tigers baseball team, and the sports program at Crescent is bar none, and these guys made it all the way to the state championship. Really exemplified character and grit, and made Anderson proud. One thing that was close to my heart is we honored Captain Rob and Heather Dolby of the Salvation Army. Been here for 3 years, done a tremendous job with the homeless shelter, and they're moving on to Atlanta because it's just the nature of the rotation with the Salvation Army. We also recognize an extraordinary young woman, Madison Watson. She did exemplary work in school and in cheer, and just a young leader that's emerging, and we wanted to recognize her. At the end, as an amateur history buff, I found this interesting. We did a proclamation of a gentleman for a War of 1812 marking, and this was out in Townville, I believe at the Townville Baptist Church, and a war marking went there for a gentleman many years ago. Actually had family come down from Michigan, so that was a very interesting and moving thing that happened. Then we went straight into business, and we called to order like we do every night, and we heard from citizens. And we heard from a couple of citizens who wanted to talk about what's been in the news lately with the car fee, or what's been discussed. And then we went into the third reading on two basic economic development matters. One of them's a county agreement with Greenville. One of them is a project that we've been working on that allowed for a solar farm that actually brought some property online with the county and was a win-win. From there, we went into pretty much the big thing of the night, and that's the second reading of the county budget. And the way the budget process works is, we've talked about in the past, it goes through 3 readings. And during that process, everything gets talked about. Little line items get talked about. Departments get talked about. Different structures get talked about. Individual projects get talked about. And it's sort of a moving discussion. And through the votes at the county council and through the budget meetings that we have separate from county council, that's all open to the public, we discuss all these items, and each council member brings their questions, citizens bring their questions. Tonight, a couple of things came up. One was about potentially more money in the budget for taking down, let's say, old or abandoned houses. And in everybody's district, there's old houses that sometimes can attract crime or unsightly. Whoever owns it may not even live in Anderson anymore, but there's a legal process for taking down those houses, and we have a pot of money that does just that. But we had some concerns in some district that these number of houses are growing, and we wanted to be able to expedite that process and potentially put more funding behind it. We also talked about realigning some positions in the sheriff's department, and this was totally procedural in the fact that it didn't cost us any money, but the way that we document salaries, we're going to move them from one department to another. It just streamlined the process, and it came as a request from the sheriff. We also talked about developer fees. And one of the things that the buildings and ordinances and the planning folks talked about is our fees were not in line with other counties. And so we had a debate about, how those departments are run, what kind of fees do they take in to cover their cost, and how that works, and what's the best way to make it work smoothly. Inevitably, we always talk about the car fee question, and the car fee, or tax, as some people want to say it, had been proposed at $25, and this would be across every car in the county. But Chairman Dunn pointed out that the discussion brought in that folks over 65 would be exempt from this. If you had more than 2 cars, it'd be exempt from this. Potentially, like if you're a veteran or had some kind of Purple Heart recipient, you'd be exempt for this. And what would that mean? One clarification I think we need to make note of is that if a car fee is considered, and it wasn't tonight, it was just discussed, but if a car fee is considered, it would be separate from the budget process. Now, we talk about it in the budget process because the implementation of it, or the lack of implementation of it, affects the budget. But if it were to be discussed, it would be a separate line item that would have to be talked about over 3 separate readings. So not to confuse it with the overall budget, but that's why it's being talked about with the budget.
And it would have, the money would be set aside only for roads.
Yes.
And the other part tonight that they did talk about in the budget, it came up, I think, that paving still is a priority. Whether that goes through or not, you've got to find money for paving somewhere.
Yeah, and that's what we're looking at, rising costs in the paving. So some folks say, well, should we have a car fee? Some folks say, well, can we streamline county services and make up the difference? That's numbers that we're getting back from the finance department, is how do you close that gap? Because I think every council member agrees that one of our core jobs is to make the roads work and to make them work correctly. Now, how do we get there? Is it through an extra fee? Is it through cutting somewhere else? Is it through growth in the county with values going up? But we have to be realistic. If there's a number, how do you close that gap? And if you don't close that gap, what are you okay with not paving? And that's an ongoing discussion. The county has been very austere in the last 12 years and really working to always keep taxes low. That's what Anderson County residents tell everybody, that they want taxes to be low. But at the same time, they talk about wanting specific services, offered to the citizens. So that's the debate that's going on, is how do you offer these services? If you do offer them, how do you pay for them? If you do pay for them, how does it come? So that's an ongoing discussion that I think is going to move into next week and probably well into the next fiscal year. But that's why it's being talked about in conjunction with the budget.
And the budget now goes to more budget workshops and more meetings and more public open things before it goes to third reading.
Yes, we're looking at a budget workshop potentially later this week or next week, and sometimes, because we're having so many of them, sometimes all the council members can make it, sometimes part of the council members can make it, but even if a council member can't make it, they're meeting with staff and talking to constituents on a daily basis to talk about what parts of the budget affect who. And so we're looking at the third reading of the budget being later this month. And once the third reading passes, then the new budget starts July 1.
So that was the major thing tonight.
That was the major thing. That's what took up most of the time. But from that, we went into a couple of other items. In the northwestern part of the county, we went into an agreement, or pursuing an agreement, to share some sewer services with an entity that spreads into Greenville County. We believe that this partnership, or working together, will help us expand sewer capacity up there, upgrade the system, and have a working relationship so that we can do more economic development. One other item that was discussed was what they call summer adjustments. Basically, way back when, if you were on sewer, they track your sewer by how much water you use. So water comes in, then the assumption is that it goes back out through the sewer. But what was happening, people are watering their yards in the summertime, or they're filling up their swimming pools. So they really wasn't using the sewer. So they wanted to make a summer adjustment that made up for that. And inevitably, it created some billing discrepancies from what was going on with sewer, what was going on with the different water companies in the county. So what they wanted to do was make an adjustment to make that right. Now, one of the things council members pointed out was we wanted people to have a pass to be able to fill up their pools in the summer and not be disproportionately hit with a sewer charge. And so those measures were put in place. They wanted a delay in this new summer adjustment so that people could be communicated about it and understand what was going on, because sometimes it's hard. Even I know where I live, figuring out what sewer service I have versus what water service I have, and how they bill. We wanted to make sure that that was clear. From there, we went into a basic zoning item in District 7, which was agreed upon unanimously. We discussed ramp fees at the airport tonight. So what a ramp fee is when a larger aircraft comes into the airport. If they land on the airport, Well, by law and by safety and by duty, we want to make sure that we have fire trucks there. We want to make sure we have adequate protection just in case something goes wrong. But if that person lands in the airport and they don't buy any gas and we provide all those services and then they take off, well, then that can be cumbersome on the taxpayers in the county. So for years we had a ramp fee. And in 2017, we did away with the ramp fee because we were wanting to promote some items out at the airport. But we found that that hurt the county disproportionately, and so we're reinstating the ramp fee. So if a large plane comes in and they don't get gas, that they pay a ramp fee. Now, if they do get gas and they fill up and they do business with the county, well, they don't have to pay the ramp fee. And the good thing with this, and the thing to make note of, is any Anderson County resident that has a plane out there, they're not paying the ramp fee because that's where they keep their plane and they're one of our residents. This is for large planes, out of county residents who are coming in and using our services. So it made sense. It came as a recommendation from the Airport Commission. It's something that we did for a number of years and it works. And so they'll work to make sure that the fee is in line with what other airports do and that it's with out of county residents, not in county. And then we went into, at the end of the meeting, we do what we always do. We made some appropriations to some local entities that do good work. We also, individual council members, just made some comments about the budget overall, things they were seeing in their district, things they like or dislike in the county. And we wrapped up the discussion not too late, but a little bit later than normal, and I think many questions were postponed to another day, and we're going to be talked about in committee. So with that, we'll move ahead, and I feel confident we'll get to a budget in the next couple of weeks, but we'll do it with thorough input, and we'll do it after we exhaust all the matters of discussion that we can make.